Hello and welcome back to another full step-by-step PC build guide, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build a PC in Fractal's brand new Torrent Compact. Size-wise, the Torrent Compact is in between the original Fractal Torrent and the brand new Torrent Nano, both of which I've already made full step-by-step build guides and also case reviews, and you'll find links to all those videos in the description. Okay, let's take a look at the other parts I've chosen for today's build. For the motherboard, I'm going to be using ASRock's Z690 Phantom Gaming Velocita. For the CPU, I'm going to be using Intel's 12th Gen Alder Lake 12700K. Keeping our CPU cool, I'm going to be using BQAT's ASRock Pro 4. To use this cooler with a Z690 motherboard, you're going to have to pick yourself up one of BQAT's LGA 1700 brackets. BQAT will send this to you for free, and you'll find a link to where you can get that in the description. For RAM, I've got 32GB of Kingston Fury DDR5 at 5200 MHz. For storage, I'm going with a single Gen 4 NVMe M.2 SSD from Sabrent. It's their blistering fast Rocket 4 Plus in 2TB capacity. Powering the whole build, I've got an 860 watt fully modular power supply from Fractal. It's their Ion Plus 2 Platinum. For the graphics card, I'm going to be using the ASUS ROG STRIX RTX 3080. For case fans, I'm going to be maximising all the fan mounting locations in the Torrent Compact. So I've got a Fractal Prisma AL12 for the rear and two Fractal Prisma AL14s for the bottom. The final part for today's build is some white cable extensions from CableMod. I'm not so sure how these are going to fit at the back of the Torrent Compact. The cable management space is only 20mm, but I am keen to test this out, so if you're thinking of using cable extensions, you're going to know whether it's a good idea or not. Okay, let's get on with the build. To remove the tempered glass side panel, we need to pull away from the top, and then the panel can simply be lifted away. Same thing with the other side panel, pull out from the top and lift away. Taking a look at the side panels we have removed, you'll notice we've got a screw hole at the top, which is going to be used to secure the panel to the case with a screw. You're going to find this useful if you're going to be moving the case, but the other place I think we're actually going to find this useful is with our rear side panel. Because we've got limited cable management space at the back and we're planning to use cable extensions, I think we might actually need to use a screw to keep our side panel on. Taking a look at our case's front I/O, we've got a power and reset button, we've got two USB Type A connectors, a single Type C connector and a separate headphone and microphone jack. To remove the case's front panel, we just need to pull down from the top, and then the panel can be lifted up and away. Behind our front panel, we've got a full-length nylon dust filter. It can be removed by lifting up here, and the filter can simply be lifted away. The case's second dust filter is at the bottom. It can simply be pulled out from the front. To remove our case's top panel, all we need to do is slide it backwards, and then it can be lifted away. At the top of the case, we've got one of the case's two accessory boxes. I'll show you what's contained in this later on. Our power supply is going to go in the top of the case, and full-size ATX power supplies up to 210mm of length are supported. We've got a nice cutout here at the top, which is designed to help plug in your motherboard's EPS cables. We've got our vibration dampened hard drive tray at the top. In the tray itself, you can install either a 3.5-inch or 2.5-inch drive, while beneath the drive tray, you can install an additional 2.5-inch drive. With our drive tray in the default position, we've got 174mm from the drive tray to the back of the case. It is possible to move the drive tray forward. If we loosen the thumb screw, you can't simply insert the drive tray into place and lower it down because the I/O cables will get in the way. So the first thing you need to do is slide the drive tray under the I/O cables, then push it backwards, get the front clips to slot into here, and then we can re-secure the thumb screw at the back. We've now got 224mm from the drive tray to the back of the case. Two other things to point out at the top of the case. We've got a Velcro strap here, which is going to help with cable management. And we've also got a fill port. So if you're thinking with going with a custom loop, you're going to find this particularly useful. On the power supply side, we've got an ARG lighting bar, which can be synced to your motherboard. Moving into the main body of the case, the Torrent Compact will accommodate motherboards up to EATX in size. In terms of fan support, at the front we've got two 180mm fans pre-installed. These can be removed, and using the brackets that come in the accessory box, I'll show you this a little bit later on, you can fit three 120 or two 140mm fans at the front. At the bottom of the case with a full-sized ATX motherboard, you can fit either two 120 or two 140mm fans. If you go with a micro ATX motherboard, it is possible to fit two 180mm fans at the bottom. You're not, however, going to be able to fit two 180s at the front at the same time. You're only going to be able to fit one 180 at the top with two 180s at the bottom. At the rear of the case, you can fit a single 120mm fan. In terms of radiator support, at the front of the case you can fit up to a 360 or 280mm radiator. At the bottom of the case it's up to a 280mm radiator, while at the rear of the case it's up to a 120mm radiator. In terms of air coolers, CPU coolers up to a maximum height of 174mm are supported. At the rear of the case we've got 7 horizontal PCI expansion slots. In terms of graphics card support, with the front fans installed, you can fit graphics cards up to 330mm. With the front fans removed, graphics cards up to 368mm are supported. If you want to mount your graphics card vertically, you'll be pleased to know the case is compatible with Fractal's Flex B20 vertical riser bracket, which isn't included with the case. Because our power supply is at the top of the case, the cable running from it is going to look untidy running down to the wall. Fractal have thought about this, and we've got some Velcro cable straps to help manage the cable nicely down to the bottom of the case where it's going to look much tidier. At the rear of the case, it's good to see we've got cable raceways and Velcro straps to help manage our cables. We've got cutouts in the right places with rubber grommets over them. And the cable routing space at the back of the case is 20mm. It's great to see the case comes with a built-in fan hub, which can accommodate up to 9 fans. We've got 3 additional SSD mounting brackets. Each of these will accommodate a 2.5-inch drive. They can be removed by loosening the thumb screw at the top and then lifting away. This is everything that's contained in the case's 2 accessory boxes. So we've got a polishing cloth, we've got an additional standoff and a tool to remove and reinstall the standoffs. We've got some cable ties. We've got our screws individually wrapped. I'm not going to go through these individually because there's a very nice diagram in the manual which tells you what each of these does. We've got a GPU support bracket, I'll show you this in a minute, and we've also got the brackets I had mentioned to allow you to install radiators or 120 or 140mm fans at the front of the case, and again I'll show you how this works in a minute. This is our GPU support bracket. What we're going to want to do is put one of these thumb screws in from underneath. And then on top we've got this little rubber pad to screw into the thumb screw. This is then going to slide along here, and what we're going to do, we're just going to leave this loosely for now. We're going to install it in the case, line this up to the right place where it supports our GPU, and then tighten up the thumb screw from underneath. We've got a slot here to secure our GPU support bracket to, so I can set it into place and then secure the bracket with 2 thumb screws at the back. You'll notice I've only put the thumb screws on loosely because what we're going to want to do is install our graphics card, slide this up to where it provides support, and then tighten the thumb screws from the back. I now want to show you how to remove the front fans and install the brackets in the accessory kit if you want to put a radiator at the front or install 120 or 140mm fans at the front. First thing to do is remove our 180mm fans. They're each held on with 4 screws, and I've already gone ahead and freed up the fan cables. Just before we insert the bracket, you'll notice we've got 2 sets of notches. These ones are labelled 120, the ones further back are labelled 140. So if you want to install 120mm fans, you're going to line the notches up with the ones labelled 120. I'm going to show you 140, so we'll go the next one along, insert the notches through the hole. Same thing on the other side. And you'll now notice that the screw holes will line up with our 140mm fans. I'm planning on keeping the 180mm fans at the front, so I'm going to put this back to stock configuration. We're now ready to start working the motherboard, and we're going to install our CPU, CPU cooler, M.2 SSD and RAM all before we put the motherboard into the case. To install our CPU, we need to open this lever. We push it down and out and all the way to the top, and then we can open the socket. Next we need to insert our CPU. There's notches at the top and bottom of the socket which line up with notches on the CPU. Make sure you've got the text in the same orientation as I do. Then we can close the cover down. We apply a little bit of pressure at the top. The back plastic protection will pop off, and then we can close our lever again, pushing it onto this little clip here, and we've now installed our CPU. The motherboard contains 4 M.2 SSD sockets. We've got a Gen 4 socket behind the top heatsink, a Gen 4 socket behind the bottom heatsink, and we've got 2 M.2 SSD sockets behind the middle heatsink. There's a Gen 3 one and a Gen 5 one. The only side issue with the Gen 5 one is it reduces our PCIe lanes on the top graphics card slot to 8 from 16. So we're going to want to install our Gen 4 drive into this top socket. The heatsink is held on with 2 screws. We can then insert our drive into the socket at a slight angle. And then what you'll notice, the same screw that's going to secure our heatsink is also going to secure our drive in place. On the back of the heatsink, we've got some plastic protection we need to remove. We can then replace the heatsink. We're now ready to install our RAM, so we need to open the clips on the 2nd and 4th RAM slot. We can then line the RAM up with the slot. Once we're happy everything is lined up, we just need to apply some firm pressure to the RAM. It's going to clip into place and the clips on both sides will close. Same thing with our second stick, line it up with the slot. Once we're happy everything's lined up, again just some firm pressure and the RAM is going to click into place. Next we can insert the back plate from our LGA 1700 mounting bracket through the back of the motherboard. Then we've got one of these standoffs to screw onto each corner. Then we've got a bracket to fit at both the top and the bottom, each is held on with 2 screws. Next we can add some thermal paste to the centre of the CPU. Before we install our CPU cooler, we need to expose the screw holes on the top of it. If you're using the cooler for the first time, you're going to need to remove the plastic protection from the cold plate. Then as we lower our cooler down, we're going to have this little bracket installed underneath, which we're going to secure to the bracket we've already fitted to the motherboard. So we can lower our cooler down into place. Then I'm going to pass the screwdriver through the hole in the cooler, pick up the screw and secure the bracket to the one we have already fitted to the motherboard. Then same thing at the other end. We can then replace the screw hole covers at the top. Next we need to slide our middle fan through the CPU cooler. Then we want to insert these metal clips through the holes on the fan. And then it's just a little bit of pressure on the clips at each side and they'll clip onto the heatsink. Same thing on the other side, we're going to put the clips through the holes on the fan. And then again, just a little bit of pressure and the clips will clip into place. I then want to plug the double fan splitter cable into our CPU fan header. And then we can plug each of the fans on the cooler into the double fan splitter cable. And then all we have to do is tuck the remaining cables in under the heatsink. Our motherboard does have an optional VRM fan, which I'm going to set into place. And then there's 2 small screws to use to secure it into place. Then we can plug the cable coming from the fan into our VRM fan header and just tuck the cable out of the way. Once we install our motherboard into the case, access to the top of the motherboard is going to be limited, so I want to plug in our 2 8-pin EPS cables now. I'm not going to use cable extensions because we're not going to see these. Next we can set our motherboard into the case, lining it up with a cutout at the back. We can then secure the motherboard into place using the screws from the accessory box. The only slight issue I had with securing the motherboard to the case was the VRM fan is blocking the screw hole at the middle and the top of the motherboard. So my advice if you are going to use the VRM fan is not to install it until after you've secured the motherboard into the case. I had to remove the fan, screw the motherboard down to the case and then reinstall the VRM fan. We can then bring our EPS cables through to the back of the case. Next I want to get our case cables plugged in. Down to this header at the bottom left hand side of the motherboard we're going to plug in our HD audio cable. Two headers along we've got one of the motherboard's ARGB connectors. Be careful not to plug into the header next to the HD audio connector. It looks like an ARGB header, but it's not. And it's this ARGB connector coming from our fan at the front. Coming from our PWM fan hub at the back of the case, we've got a 4-pin PWM connector. So I'm just going to plug it into one of our fan headers in the middle of the motherboard. Then we've got our front panel connectors, which are going to go into this header here. Starting off with the top row, working from left to right, we're going to plug in power LED positive and power LED negative. Next to that, we can plug in our power switch. And in the bottom row then, directly in front of the power switch, we're going to plug in a reset switch. Then we've got our Type-C connector, our USB 3.0 header, We're now ready to install our power supply into the case. I've gone ahead and plugged in the cables we're going to need. So we've got a 24-pin connector. We've got two PCIe cables. Each has two 6+2-pin connectors. And we've got a SATA connector. Though we're not going to install any SATA drives, we do need a SATA connector to power our fan hub. We've also got spare connectors to plug in our 8-pin EPS cables once we've installed the power supply in the case. The other thing to point out is we have a 0 fan mode on the fan in our power supply. When the power supply is under low load, the fan will stop spinning if we have this turned on, which we do. This is our power supply's intake fan. Because the top of the case is going to be solid, we are going to want to install it with the fan facing down the way. So I can set the power supply into the case, lining it up with the back. And then I've got 4 of these thicker screws from the case accessory box to secure our power supply into place. Then we can bring our two 8-pin EPS cables up and plug them into the power supply. And then we can keep the excess cable in the power supply compartment at the top of the case. So we'll just tuck it in here underneath all the other cables. The other cable I want to plug in at this stage is the SATA cable coming from our fan hub. So we'll plug it into our SATA power cable. And then again, we're going to tuck all the cable into the power supply compartment. At this stage, I'm going to plug our white cable extensions into our power supply cables. Next, I'm going to bring our 24-pin cable through the cutout, line it up with the motherboard, and push into place. We've got some cable combs on the cable to help organize the cable. Next, we've got our case fans to install. We're going to install two 140mm fans at the bottom set to intake, so they're going to have to be upside down with the bottom of the fans facing the bottom of the case. Then I'm going to bring all the cables coming from the fan through the cutout to the back. We can then secure the fans into place at the bottom using the screws from the accessory box. We can then pass the cables coming from our rear fan through to the back, and then secure the fan into place at the back. We then need to get all our fans plugged in. We've got two different connectors coming from each of the fan. The first is a 4-pin PWM fan connector, and the second is an ARGB connector. So we'll start off with the PWM fan connectors. What we need to do is plug these into our fan hub. We've got 9 places we can plug them in, although we're only going to need to plug into 5 of them. So I'm going to start off with our front fans into slot number 1 and slot number 2. Then we've got the 2 fans at the bottom into slot 3 and 4. And then with our rear case fan, I'm going to route it under these other cables and get it plugged into slot number 9, which is going to have the least stretch on the cable. Then we've got the ARGB connectors to connect up. Each fan has a standard 3-pin 5V ARGB connector, but also nice to see Fractal have included a splitter cable, so we're going to be able to daisy chain our fans together. So coming from our front fan, we've already plugged this end into the motherboard. We've got this additional connector here. So I'm going to take the other ARGB connector coming from our other front fan, line the 2 of them up and push into place. Then coming from this, we've got another splitter cable. So what I'm going to do is route this cable up to the top of the case, which is going to make plugging in all the other cables a little bit easier, and try and leave as many as possible up at the top of the case. Okay, at the top of the case, I've got the ARGB connector from our second front fan, and I'm going to plug it into the ARGB connector coming from one of our bottom fans. The splitter cable in this fan I wasn't able to route all the way to the top, so what I'm going to do is pass the ARGB connector from the next fan down to it. So we'll join them up here. Then into this fan, I'm going to plug our rear fan. And that leaves us one spare splitter cable, which we're going to need to plug the ARGB connector coming from the lighting bar on our power supply shroud. There we go, that's all the ARGB connected up. We're now ready to install our graphics card, so we're going to need to remove the second and third slot cover from the top. We can then open the clip in the top PCIe slot on the motherboard. We can then line our graphics card up with the slot. Once we're happy we've got everything lined up, we can apply some firm pressure to the graphics card. It's going to clip into place, and then we can use the thumb screws we've just removed to secure it into place. We can then slide our GPU support bracket up until it's starting to take the weight off the graphics card, and then we'll secure it into place with the 2 thumb screws. So you can see our GPU support bracket is doing a great job of supporting the graphics card. The little bit of rubber that was on the support bracket, I have moved it as far to the back as I possibly can, and that's where you're going to want to install it. Next we can plug our PCIe cable extensions into the graphics card. And then we've got these cable combs to help organize the cables. Okay, the last thing to do is some cable management. We've got some Velcro cable straps and cable raceways to help us. And again, we can store as many cables as we can in the top of the case. Okay, so that's the build complete, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the software setup, but in case you don't need to stay for that, what I wanted to tell you is I'm also going to do a full case review of this case, and you'll find a link to that video in the description. As well as that, I've also checked out the Torrent Nano, this case's little brother, and again you'll find full step-by-step build guides and the case review in the description. Remember, if you have enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well. Okay, so let's get on with the Windows installation before we get into drivers, RGB software, and everything else you're going to need to get your PC up and running. So importantly, I have loaded a Windows 11 bootable USB drive into the back of the PC. If you don't know how to make one of those, I've made a video on it, and you'll find a link to that in the description. Okay, so let's press the power button and see what happens. Okay, so that's a good sign. We have got lighting and fans spinning. So we're just going to have to watch the monitor and see what happens. That's a good sign. We've got the ASRock logo appearing. And it's going to tell us to press F2 to run the setup or press F1 to continue. I'm just going to press F1. And that's good. We've got the Windows icon appearing, which means it's found the bootable USB drive in the back of the PC. So next thing we're looking to appear is the Windows installer screen. So that's us through to the Windows installer screen. I'm now going to show you how to install Windows 11, but to make things a little bit easier, I'm going to switch over to the screen mode. Okay, over the next lot of screens, I'm going to pick the options that are relevant to me. If different options apply to you, you should pick the ones that are relevant to you. I'm from the United Kingdom, so I'm going to click Next. I'm going to go for Install Now. If you've got a Windows 11 product key, you should go ahead and enter it in the box. If you don't have one, click I don't have a product key. Click which version of Windows you're going to get one for in the future. I'll go for Windows 11 Pro, click Next. We're going to accept the license terms, click Next. We're going to go for Custom Install. We've only got the one drive. If you have more than one drive, you can choose which one you want to install Windows on. We'll click Next. And this next bit will take a little bit of time, so I'm going to go ahead and skip through it. Okay, I'm from the United Kingdom. I'm going to click Yes, Yes again, and I'm going to skip a secondary keyboard layout. We need to name our device. Click Next. Our PC will then restart. I'm going to set this up for personal use. Click Next. If you've got a Microsoft account, you can go ahead and put your details in. If you don't, you can create one, or if you want, you can go for an offline account by clicking Sign In Options and then clicking Offline Account. I'm going to skip this for now, and I just need to enter my name. Click Next, create a password, and then I need to set up 3 security questions. I'm going to let apps use my location, click Accept. Yes to find my device, click Accept. Just the required data, click Accept. No tinking, no again, no again. Okay, that's Windows 11 installed. We're getting a pop-up for Auto Driver Installer, so I'm going to click Yes to this and click Yes. Okay, so this program has found all the drivers we're going to need. I'm just going to click Update and click Yes. Okay, so that's all our drivers installed. All that happened after each driver, the computer restarted, so you just need to log back in and the program restarted again and went on to the next driver. So really, really useful. We'll click on OK. The only outstanding driver for us to get is the one for our graphics card. We need to head over to NVIDIA's website. I've already filled in the options that we need, and I'm going to click on Search. Click on Download and Download. We can then head over to our Downloads folder, click on the file, click Yes, click OK. And then we've got a choice here. We can just install the graphics driver, or we can install the graphics driver plus the GeForce Experience. I'm just going to install the graphics driver today. Click Agree and Continue. We're going to go for Express Installation, click Next. Okay, that's the driver installed. We can click on Close. Next thing I want to do is get Windows fully up to date. So we click on the Windows icon, click on the settings. We're going to go down to Windows Update, and we're going to click Download Now. What's going to happen is Windows is going to find a whole load of updates. It's going to install them. Again, we're going to have to restart our computer a number of times, but we're going to keep coming back looking for more updates and not move forward until we've got everything updated. Okay, that's Windows fully up to date. Whenever I click on check for updates, there's no more updates available. So if we head over to our motherboards page over on ASRock's website, you can see the Downloads tab is where we would get our drivers. If the pop-up hadn't come up at the start, we would have to come here manually and download all the drivers. The next thing I want to do is visit the BIOS, but before I do that, I want to make sure I've downloaded the latest version to a USB drive, so I can show you how to update the BIOS if we don't have the latest version installed. So version 6.02 is available, so I'm going to click on the download, and then if we head over to our Downloads folder, and we're going to right click and go Extract All, Extract, and this is our BIOS file, so I'm going to copy this, and I've plugged in a USB drive, and I'm going to paste to it. To enter the BIOS, we need to restart our computer, and then as the screen goes black, we're going to want to press the delete key, and that will take us into the BIOS. Okay, so that's us into the BIOS. First thing to look at is the version. So we've got 3.03, so we do have a later version installed on the USB drive. So I'm going to show you how to update the BIOS. First bit of advice I would give you is don't update the BIOS unless you really have to. For example, if you're having problems with your computer or the new version gives you features you need, because if things go wrong during the BIOS update, you can brick your motherboard. It's also really important that you don't lose power during the BIOS update. So I'm going to go down and click on Instant Flash and click Yes. So it's found the version on our USB drive, so I'm going to click on Update. And it's asking us, are we sure we want to do this? I'm going to click Yes. Okay, that's the BIOS updated. I'm going to press Enter and our PC will reboot. Okay, that's us back into the BIOS, and you can see the version has been updated to 6.02. The first thing I want to do is enable our XMP profile. You can see our RAM is currently running at 4800 megahertz, but it can run at 5200 megahertz. So we can click on the XMP profile. It's currently set to auto. So we click for profile 1, which is going to give us 5200 megahertz. The next thing I want to do is take a look at our fans. So I'm going to head over to the advanced mode and click on the hardware monitor. So here we can see the status of each of our fans. We have plugged our fan hub into chassis fan number 4. So if we scan down, our CPU fan is currently running in the standard mode. I'm happy with that. I'm going to leave it in standard mode. We don't have anything plugged into CPU fan 2. Our MOSFET fan, I'm going to turn to silent mode. And as well, the VRM fan, I'm also going to put on to silent mode. So chassis fan number 4 was where we had plugged our fan hub into. It's currently running in auto. I'm just going to change it over to PWM mode. And what you can notice in the background, the noise in the PC has significantly decreased, because whenever this is running in auto or GC mode, quite often I find the fans run quite loud. They're running in the standard mode. The PC is already quite quiet at the moment, so I'm quite happy with the standard mode. They're monitoring the motherboard temperature, which is the way I do like to set the fans up. I like to have the CPU fans working off the CPU temperature. If you have all your system fans working off the CPU temperature as well, what you will often find is they will ramp up and ramp down as the CPU temperature goes up and down during simple tasks, and it can make your PC quite noisy and irritating to sit beside. So my preferred method is to leave these running at the motherboard temperature where they won't fluctuate up and down as much. And then when the CPU fans go up and down on the cooler, you probably won't notice the difference. So if we now head back up to the top, you can see that our CPU fan and chassis fan are running at relatively low revs per minute. And because we have switched these fans over to silent mode, they're not currently running with the PC idling. The last thing I want to do before leaving the BIOS is set up our RGB. So we click on Tool and ASRock Polychrome. And at the top, we're going to select all RGB LED. It's currently set to rainbow, so we're going to have to go into here and click on static. It's changed everything currently to blue. If we want white, what we need to do is drag this all the way to the top, and the same for here. And now you'll see that all the lighting in the PC, apart from our graphics card, has turned to white. So we can click on Exit. Okay, to save our settings, we just need to click on Exit, and then we're going to go for Save Changes and Exit. It's going to give us a summary of what we have done, and then we're going to click on Yes. Okay, that's us back into Windows. The first thing I want to do is check our RAM is running at the correct speed. So if we right click on the Windows icon, click on Task Manager, click on More Details, click on Performance, click on Memory, we can now see our RAM is running at 5200 megahertz. There's one more bit of RGB software we're going to need to get to control the lighting on our graphics card. So if we head over to our graphics cards page over on ASUS's website, we're in the Support tab, and we head all the way down to the bottom. We're looking for the Armoury crate, so we'll click on Download. And then Open File. And click Yes. So we've got an option on what we can install. We have a choice of the Armoury crate or the Aura Creator or both. I've always found the lighting works much better in the Armoury crate. It's more intuitive, so I'm just going to click on Start. Okay, that's the Armoury crate installed. I'm going to click Launch. We're going to have to accept the license agreement, click Next, scan all the way down to the bottom, click I agree, and close. And I'm going to click on Cancel. So our graphics card's selected. If we click on the Aura effects, we can see at the moment it's set to rainbow. Again, I'm looking for a static white, so I click on Static, click on the color, and to get white, I'm going to have to put 255 into each of these two boxes. And there you go, our graphics card has now turned to white. Okay, that's the PC fully set up. It's running cool and quiet and looking good. So I am going to do some thermal testing now. I'm going to test out removing the bottom fans, removing the rear fan, seeing if it makes any difference and working out what is the best cooling configuration for this case. I'm not going to share this in this video. I'm going to do that in the full case review, together with my experiences of having built in the Torrent Compact. So if you have found the video useful, please remember to give it a thumbs up. If you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well, and I'll see you in the next video.